Hi guys, welcome back to the Social Tune. And today we're going back, way back, decades before I was born, back to the year 1961. Yeah, you heard me, subscribers, young and old. I hope you all like black and white music videos and music that even most of your parents would have no knowledge of. As I said, welcome back. Even I'll admit that this is an odd pick, though. After all, this is a year that many have kind of dismissed or forgotten about, long before psychedelic rock or the phenomenon that was the Beatles ever even made their appearances. But that's exactly why I picked it, as a very good starting point for the 60s overall. However, if you're going into this expecting happy-go-lucky, cheesy music that hasn't aged well at all, well, we do get some of that, but for the most part, this was a dark, depressing year for the Hot 100. Seriously, for an era that is so often remembered as being cheerful and carefree, the music of this year may catch many listeners off guard. And I know that many of you won't watch this entire video because of the stigma surrounding the music of that era, that it's all boring and pointless and has no place in our modern day society. But frankly, a lot of the music released in this year has a lot more depth to it than anything you could hope to hear on the charts these days. So with all that in mind, these are the top 10 best hit songs of 1961, starting with some very deserving honorable mentions. There were a fair few painful cuts from this list, and right from the start, I was certain this was going to be one of them. But after a few listens, I realized that I really do love this track. And apparently, I wasn't the only one, as this was the biggest hit of the entire year, which may surprise some of you, because most of the people I asked about this had never even heard of this song. And in the year where racism and culture vultures were still very much a big thing, it feels really good that the biggest hit of the entire year was from a black man singing about thinking restlessly about his girlfriend. And it's well deserved too, because with the nervous energy, the horns and pianos playing off each other incredibly well, and that fantastic hook to tie it all together, this is easily one of the biggest growers of this year and deserves its spot on this list.
What would I do if he came back and wanted you?
This is a very slow, steady build-up, but the crescendo and the climax are extremely impressive, with the steady horn line and the bolero dance cadence, as Roy Orbison frets over what would happen if his girlfriend's ex ever came back into their lives. You feel the tension and the uncertainty in his performance, and when that ex does come back into the picture, you find yourself as uncertain as him which of them she'll choose. So much so that I'm not going to spoil it for you, because this song deserves a lot more attention. Although in terms of Roy Orbison tracks, more of you may be a little bit more familiar with...
Then you said so long, left me standing all alone and crying.
Now personally, I first heard this song in an episode of Only Fools and Horses, meaning that I do kind of just have a natural love for it. However, going back to listen to the original song, it's actually an excellent track in its own right. The subtle percussion, the keyboard, and most of all, Roy Orbison's emotional and powerful performance. Sure, my eyebrows can't help but raise slightly when he breaks into that falsetto of his, but the lyrics about reuniting with an old flame and having all of those old emotions well up again, that's definitely potent and reminiscent of some of Adele's best work. True, I do prefer the version he did in 1987 with K.D. Lang, but it's still a great song and definitely one of the best of the year. So one thing we had an abundance of in 1961 was instrumental tracks, full compositions with little to no lyrics on top. And while none were quite amazing enough to make it into the top 10, there were a few that I did feel I had to mention as some real standouts, with this being the first of them. And if you've been watching my channel for a while, this may surprise you. After all, I have often said I am not a fan of repetition, and this is basically the same elongated loop repeated multiple times. But what works for me here is the variety within those loops. The song still has a certain structure to it, adding more elements every few seconds, including including vocal snippets from Floyd Newman, who also handles the saxophone solo. And by the end, with the keyboards, drums, sax, and what I could swear was an accordion, the song carried a strong, undeniable groove that I really did enjoy. So remember how I said that 1961 could get very depressing? Well, here's a song about a woman who goes to the cinema only to find her husband in the arms of her best friend. But since she has no idea how to deal with it, she just cries bitterly in the back of the theater. And afterwards, whenever anyone asks her what's the matter, she just replies that sad movies always make her cry. Jesus, that is heartbreaking, especially with Sue Thompson's incredibly compelling performance. Unfortunately though, that tone in her voice is a little bit of a double-edged sword, as I can't deny that her vocals can be a little bit piercing and nasal for my taste, but the subject matter and the songwriting that pull absolutely no punches still guarantee it a spot on this list all the same. And now for something a lot happier. Okay, you had to give me at least one of these. A completely love-struck song about a girl who drives Neil Sedaka wild. A girl he can't believe is with him and is completely head over heels for. True, some of the lyrics are a little bit bold-faced and haven't aged all that well, but his exuberance and enthusiasm, along with the upbeat instrumentation, are all so infectious that I can't help but smile whenever I hear it. Definitely one of the most recognizable songs on this list, and for good reason. This is easily the best instrumental track of the year, and it all comes from one man, James Joseph Wisner, better known for this stage name, Kokomo. And even with his impressive discography producing for others and himself throughout music history, this still stands as one of his towering achievements for me, a fantastic tune. One that was turned down by 10 labels before he just decided to release it independently, at which point it promptly became a smash hit. Man oh man, is that cathartic.
There's no one I care to see. I'm breaking in a brand new broken heart.
Now, if you want a female singer who sells that heartbreak with a slightly less piercing tone than Sue Thompson, here's my example. While not quite as lyrically interesting as some of the other songs in this vein, it makes up for it with a subtle backing instrumentation, some really excellent multi-tracking, and Connie Francis giving it her all, perfectly conveying that feeling of just wanting to be left alone to deal with her heartbreak. Beautiful song, definitely deserving all the praise it gets.
Lost love and loneliness, memories of your caress, so divine, and how I wish you were mine again, my dear. I'm gonna see you too. Sea of heartbreak.
While this song may not be quite as emotional as the last one, it definitely still knows how to lyrically paint an evocative picture. While there were arguably sadder songs that touched me more emotionally in 1961, and we will get to them, this one still managed to stick in my head more than most. And considering the above-average songwriting with the fittingly sea-themed imagery, as well as that jaunty instrumental, it's definitely worth something, at least to me.
Next to Hollywood Argyle's a mighty nice group of kids. We'd like to send them roving on a downhill pair of skids.
There's a group that we heard of that's awful hip.
Alley-oop, oop, 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 oop.
Whenever we get a joke song on the charts nowadays, most of us let out a collective groan. However, if you, like me, are a fan of the comedic antics of acts like Abbott and Costello and the Marx Brothers, 1961 definitely has a few songs that will pique your interest, with this definitely being one of the best of them. It's basically a live recording of the four preps essentially roasting a bunch of other groups, with some very witty songwriting and some very impressive harmonies. It's like a barbershop quartet mixed with a comedy act act, and it cracks me up every time. So suck it, Lil Dicky. This is how you do a comedic song. And now, with that opening act out of the way, time to get to the stars of the evening.
Dum dum, a diddly dum. Dum dum, a diddly dum. Sing it out. Dum dum, a diddly dum.
So, the late 50s and early 60s were a time where country music was still cool to listen to. Which obviously is awesome. After all, it's one of the genres I love the most. Where the best of it can provoke emotions and excellent songwriting, the likes of which you would only really find elsewhere in hip-hop. And while I still do love storytelling rap, many country songs have still stood the test of time by telling timeless stories. And while this one wouldn't quite rank amongst my all-time favorites, I can still definitely see why country fans still remember this one to this day.
Every morning at the mine you could see him arrive. He stood 6'6" and weighed 245, kind of broad at the shoulder and narrow at the hip. And everybody knew you didn't give no lip to Big John. Big John, Big John, Big Bad John.
I can understand why people may have an issue with this song. With the minimalist production, a real lack of any sort of hook, and no real singing outside of the backing vocalists, it's almost more of a spoken word piece. But that's kind of what makes it so compelling.
Nobody seemed to know where John called home. He just drifted into town and stayed all alone. He didn't say much, he kinda quiet and shy. And if you spoke at all, you just said hi to Big John.
It tells the story of Big John, a huge, silent giant of a man whom nobody really knew much about at the mining site where he worked. Oh, he seemed harmless enough, but not really the easiest guy to connect with. We all know that strong, silent type who just shows up to get the work done and whom nobody really talks to. And as this song shows you, those people are often the ones who can surprise you most of all. As John does when, one day, the miners run into an accident.
Then came the day at the bottom of the mine when a timber cracked and men started crying. Miners were praying and hearts beat fast, and everybody thought that they'd breathed their last except John. And with all of his strength he gave a mighty shove. Then a miner yelled out, "There's a light up above," and 20 men scrambled from a would-be grave. And now there's only one left down there to save Big John.
That's right, 20 of them got out and one was left below, and all because of the sacrifice of one man who they never really knew anything about. And those are the kind of brave men who deserve to be remembered most of all.
Now they never reopened that worthless pit, they just placed a marble stand in front of it. These few words are written on that stand. At the bottom of this mine lies one hell of a man, Big John.
Definitely a dark song, but there's something weirdly inspiring about it. A classic for a reason, and definitely one that hits just as hard today as it did back then.
Big Bad John. Big John.
Dum dum, a diddly dum. Dum dum, a diddly dum. Sing it out. Dum dum, a diddly dum.
Let's talk about feminism in 1961. Yeah, there are going to be a number of uncomfortable topics covered in this video, you've been warned. Because while you could definitely say a lot of things about the music released this year, there were definitely some questionable moments for women on the Hot 100 in 1961. Heck, even a song like Calendar Girl could be taken the wrong way by a lot of people nowadays, even if I do still find it endearing. But there's a love-struck song like that, and then there's the kind of disgusting slut-shaming that even back then would have been considered in bad taste. And ordinarily, this type of song would never even come close to this list, but with the right framing and one hell of a beat.
Yeah, my should I known it from the very start. This girl will leave me with a broken heart. Listen, people, what I'm telling you. I'll keep away from a runaround Sue, yeah.
The way this song plays with your expectations is kind of genius. It starts out so quiet and mournful and kind of sappy.
It's about a girl that I once knew.
And then it just hits you with the more upbeat instrumental, the backing vocals, and the tremendous horns.
With every single guy in town. Hey, hey, whoa.
The energy energy here is so infectious, I can't help but enjoy this groove. Plus, it does help that the lyrics are framed appropriately. After all, Runaround Sue may be a very cruel nickname, but the lyrics do actually show that it's pretty well earned.
She likes to travel around, yeah. She love you and she'll put you down. Now people let me put you wise. Sue goes out with other guys.
It's similar to Niall Horan's excellent song On the Loose. A cautionary tale about a girl who's broken many hearts, doesn't seem to care, and, let's be fair here, probably deserves the reputation she's earned.
Ask any fool that she ever knew that they keep away from a runaround Sue. I pray that yeah, keep away from this girl.
Normally I wouldn't encourage panning someone and sticking this label on them, but when it's earned, it's earned. And plus the beat is just so catchy, it almost feels oddly familiar. Oh. Oh no.
I keep away from a runaround.
And don't forget the flowers every anniversary.
I'm not ready to face this right now, just go on to number 8.
Don't you know what you do now? Whoa.
Dum dum, a diddly dum. Dum dum, a diddly dum. Sing it out. Dum dum, a diddly dum.
Really, dear future husband, really? Oh, hello, audience. Hello, camera. Hello, sloppy transition.
Hello, walls. Hot things go for you today. Don't you miss her? Since she upped and walked away.
Heartbreak is a very common theme on this list, and no, this is not going to be the last example you see of that in this video. Heck, some of you may be wondering why a song as seemingly odd as this even made the top 10. After all, it's just a song about a man walking around his house saying hello to inanimate objects. That's pretty damn corny. Well, quite simply, it's very human.
Aren't you lonely? Since our darling disappeared.
This is from the point of view of a man who has just lost the love of his life. And from the way he talks, it was a pretty long relationship, one where they shared a house together. And so, everything around him reminds him of her. And talking to these objects is his only way of coping, which is pretty fucking sad, and that's exactly the point.
She went away and left us all alone the way she planned. Guess we'll have to learn to get along without her if we can.
The songwriting's really inspired if you think about it in those terms. Which should be no surprise, as this was the mainstream's first real taste of a singer-songwriter who would go down as a country legend, that of course being Willie Nelson. Yep, even back then, boy could he make an audience feel for a character.
You know I can't sleep, so won't you bear with me a while?
This is a lovely song, and one that doesn't get talked about nearly often enough. And speaking of songs soaked in heartbreak,
she'll be gone a long, long time.
Dum dum, a diddly dum. Dum dum, a diddly dum. Sing it out. Dum dum, a diddly dum.
Okay, you can't very well talk about the music of this era without a certain name popping up. A name that has now been dragged through the mud for years and years, when if you actually do your research, it seems like he was more of a scapegoat for the record producers, the managers, and even the radio stations, who were actually guilty of cultural appropriation and had no problem profiting off of it. And while he may not have a perfect record in terms of his hits, he was an undeniable talent behind the microphone. And so, when he had the right songwriting backing him up, he almost always knocked it right out of the park.
A very old friend came by today, 'cause he was telling everyone in town of the love that he just found, and Marie's the name of his latest flame.
Well, now that I've opened those floodgates, let me reiterate that the man was not perfect. Putting aside the rampant drug abuse in his later years, his songwriting got progressively worse as time went on and led to some truly embarrassing hits. But when he got it right, he fucking nailed it, as he does here.
He talked and talked, and I heard him say that she had the longest, blackest hair, the prettiest green eyes anywhere.
The quick tempo, the sharp guitar line, and the pianos that break through on the chorus give the song a ton of momentum, and Elvis performs it tightly and efficiently, detailing the story of this girl that his friend is telling him about.
Though I smiled, the tears inside were a-burning. I wished him luck and then he said goodbye. He was gone, but still his words kept returning. What else was there for me to do but cry?
As it turns out, though, this may be a girl that he himself has come across in the past. In fact, he may know her very, very well.
Would you believe that yesterday this girl was in my arms and swore to me she'd be mine eternally? And Marie's the name of his latest flame.
This is a timeless tale of love and betrayal, told by an artist who many would still consider timeless today. Not perfect by any means, but with moments of real brilliance, with this definitely being one of them.
Yeah, Marie's the name of his latest flame. Oh, Marie's the name of his latest flame.
Dum-dum, a diddly-dum. Uh-huh. Dum-dum, a diddly-dum. Sing it out. Dum-dum, a diddly-dum.
So we've had a number of breakup songs on this list so far, as well as a couple about heartbreak. So now, let's dive into the deep end of those depressing waters, and trust me, this is not gonna be as easy to talk about as the last entry.
Moody River, more deadly than the vainest night. Moody River, your muddy water took my baby's life.
Okay, of all the artists on this list, this is one that I'm less than happy to be talking about. He was the most successful artist of the 50s after Elvis, and his legacy, while pretty huge, has since become hopelessly entangled with his religious beliefs, and yes, his cultural appropriation. And first off, there's nothing wrong with being religious. Many people believe in God and still manage to be open to other people's beliefs and civil rights. I mean, the guy seems to have some kind of sense of humor, but when you're on TV saying this...
And this whole thing about restrooms, look, I knew Bruce Jenner long ago. To me, he's still Bruce. I don't think he would want other males who think they're females to go into young girls, say in high school and other public places.
Yeah, you'll excuse me if I stop listening now. On the culture vulture side of things, though... yeah, there's no excuse. He was always pretty blatant and unapologetic about how much he stole from black culture. However, while I can't call myself a fan of his music by any means, I still can't deny that Moody River is a fantastic song.
On the ground, your glove I found with a note addressed to me. It read, "Dear love, I've done you wrong, now I must set you free."
It's a song about a man waiting by the river to meet his lover, over a slightly jaunty piano line and gospel backing vocals, when suddenly he spots her glove on the ground along with a note, specifically a suicide note.
No longer can I live with this hurt and this sin. I just couldn't tell you that guy was just a friend.
So she cheated on him and then felt so bad about it that she jumped into the river and drowned in order to kill herself. Yeah, I don't have a joke for that. That's just fucking sad. Especially when the next line shows our protagonist staring stunned into the reflection of these waters that have taken away his love.
I looked into the muddy waters and what could I see? I saw a lonely, lonely face just looking back at me.
Not exactly a happy song, like at all. But despite my personal feelings for Pat Boone and his career, I still can't deny that it's a great song. Now, can we please get to something a little less depressing and controversial?
Sing it out, dum dum, a diddly dum.
If she leave us alone, or we would have a happy home. Sent from down below.
So remember earlier when I said there was still a lot of legitimate comedy on the charts back then? Well, what better way to make an audience laugh than to make a song that pretty much anybody can relate to?
The worst person I know. Mother-in-law. She worries me so.
Okay, granted, this is played up, but that is part of the joke. In-laws are naturally intimidating, and this particular mother of Ernie Cado's beloved seems to be anybody's worst nightmare. Heck, he flat out compares her to Satan, which is yet another indication that this is all kind of meant to be over the top and taken as a joke.
Satan shouldn't be her name. Mother-in-law. To me, they're about the same.
It's such a detailed song and is so unrelentingly blunt in describing how awful this woman is. And yeah, it manages to crack me up whenever I listen to it. Plus, it helps that Ernie gives a great performance, and the added backing vocals provide a sticky hook that matches the drums, pianos, and horns to a T. This is the type of song that could still be played by any pub or lounge band even nowadays. It holds up incredibly well.
She think her advice is a concept. But if she will leave, that would be the solution. And don't come back no more.
I think the only thing you could possibly fault this song for is maybe for picking on the mother. I mean, in most cases, it's typical for the father to be the one that's hard to impress. And to all of you who think that, you clearly do not have an Irish mother. Trust me, it gets vicious. Either way, this song definitely works for me, and it's easily one of the best of the year.
Dum dum, a diddly dum. Dum dum, a diddly dum. Sing it out, dum dum, a diddly dum.
So as I explained before, there's an inherent reflex for people of my age to dismiss 60s music as cheesy. And while I have shown you many examples that show the opposite, it is true that there were still many sappy, cheesy songs that made the year-end Hot 100. None of which we're going to make this list, of course, with one exception.
I said hello, Mary Lou. Goodbye, heart, sweet Mary Lou. I'm so in love with you. I knew Mary Lou, we never part. So hello, Mary Lou. Goodbye, heart.
I'm sorry, a classic's a classic, and this song is absolutely iconic. A love song dedicated to Mary Lou, the girl next door who can steal your heart with just one look. And while Ricky Nelson himself may have ended his relationship at the time in a very messy and public divorce, he sure as hell does sell that wide-eyed love effortlessly.
Pass me by one sunny day, flash those big brown eyes my way, and ooh, I wanted you forevermore.
I think the reason that this song has stuck in the public consciousness for so long is that it's not directed at you or baby, it's instead directed at a specific character. And the detailed way his feelings for her are described when he sees her, as well as how utterly helpless he becomes to walk away, that's something that resonated with a lot of people years after the height of its popularity.
I saw your lips, I heard your voice. Believe me, I just had no choice. Wild horses couldn't make me stay away. I thought about a moonlit night, arms around you good and tight. That's all I had to see for me to say. Hey, hey, hello, Mary Lou.
The cowbell, the guitars, the harmonies, the absolutely unforgettable hook. This is a perfect example of a love song that everybody knows and remembers. And while it may be a little bit cliched to include it on this list, try as I might, I couldn't not give it the credit it deserves.
Yes, hello, Mary Lou, goodbye, heart.
Dum-dum, a diddly-dum. Uh-huh. Dum-dum, a diddly-dum. Sing it out. Dum-dum, a diddly-dum.
And now for a classic that is the complete opposite of all that. Yeah, of all the songs about kicking a lover to the curb, this is easily the best one that 1961 had to offer. I mean, the phrase hit the road jack is so deeply ingrained into my psyche at this point that the rest of the song instantly pops into my head whenever I hear the first line. The sleazy horns, the tight piano line, the trio of singers telling Ray Charles to pack his bags and leave. And for a refreshing change, Ray Charles himself.
Oh, woman, oh, treat me so mean, you mean so, woman, I've had to say. I guess if you said so, I then have to beg the things and go.
He plays the guy trying to make excuses and change her mind, and while most male artists, especially back then, would have simply had the narrative switch and have her take him back, he shows that no matter what, he's not going to get that second chance.
Now, baby, listen, baby, don't treat me this way, but I'll be back on my feet someday.
Don't care if you do, cause understood. You ain't got no money, you just ain't good.
Well, I guess if you said so, I then have to beg my things and go.
It's iconic, it's sticky as hell, and looking back on it, surprisingly progressive and timeless. Of all the songs on this list, it's definitely the one that I expect all of you to recognize. And if by some cruel twist of fate you've never heard it before, go find it right now because it absolutely kicks ass.
Dum-dum, a diddly-dum. Uh-huh. Dum-dum, a diddly-dum. Sing it out. Dum-dum, a diddly-dum.
At the end of the day, there were only two songs that could have topped this list, and I went back and forth on which one to put on top for months. Both are timeless classics and some of the best of their respective genres. So, while this song may have ended up at number 2, I still can't stress how utterly perfect it really is.
I fall to pieces each time I see you again.
Patsy Cline is one of the best artists in country music history. A wonderfully talented woman taken from us far too early at the tender age of 30 in a plane crash that killed her in 1963, only 2 years after this song was released. And yet her legacy has survived, with a ton of music giants citing her as a huge inspiration to them, and a ton of awards and accolades being bestowed upon her posthumously. And I Fall to Pieces is, in my opinion, one of her greatest works.
You want me to act like we've never kissed. You want me to forget, pretend we've never met.
The subtle piano, the keening guitar, the cooing backing vocals. The mix here is perfect and sounds years ahead of its time. This could drop nowadays and still not raise too many eyebrows. The production quality is just that high. And then there's Patsy herself with a controlled and quivering delivery that manages to convey so much emotion while still being poised and grandiose. It would have been so easy to belt a song like this, but she manages to convey all of that emotion without needing to force it.
You walk by
want to know the craziest thing about this song? Despite her incredible performance and how flawless it is, Patsy originally didn't want to sing it. According to producer Owen Bradley, this song was actually offered to a number of other artists, like Brenda Lee, who said it was too country for her, and Roy Drusky, who said it wasn't a man's song. However, a couple of weeks after Patsy accepted it, she ironically called it too pop, and claimed that the backing vocalists from the Jordanaires were going to drown her out. However, after a little bit of coaxing, she did it anyway, and it resulted in this masterpiece.
I fall to pieces each time someone speaks your name.
The song itself is about a guy that Patsy used to date, but they're now broken up and have agreed to be friends. However, when she sees him, she can't take it and just collapses inwardly. After all, when you've had a relationship with someone, sometimes it's hard to move on, or even see them again without having all of that pain resurface.
You tell me to find someone else to love, someone who loved me too, the way you used to do.
I'll say it again, this is a perfect song and one of the greatest country songs of all time. And with the wonderful production, the incredible performance, and a topic that many of us are all too familiar with, it's not hard to see why. Rest in peace, Patsy Cline. I hope that your legacy continues to thrive. Phenomenal song, and yet not quite the best of 1961. So what could be better?
You walk by and I fall to pieces.
Dum dum, a diddly dum. Uh-huh. Dum dum, a diddly dum. Sing it out. Dum dum, a diddly dum.
So I Fall to Pieces is a classic, a song I absolutely adore, and it came very close to topping this list. However, in the end, it was just edged out for one very simple reason. That being that in a year where heartbreak, separation, anger, scorn, and sadness were such recurring themes on the Hot 100, I really needed a song that gave me some hope for the world and brought everyone together. And thankfully, 1961 was the year where the ultimate anthem to solidarity and sticking through the tough times together made its debut, and it topped this list.
So darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand. Stand by me. Stand by me.
From the bass and triangle that open up this track, most of us can instantly recognize it. The strings that give this song a ton of swelling grandeur, the humming backing vocals that rise in volume along with everything else in the production, and of course, leading it all, you have Benny King, with his rougher vocal timbre filled with enthusiasm and passion, as he calls out the timeless mantra that has inspired millions for decades.
No, I won't be afraid. Oh, I won't be afraid, just as long as you stand by me.
In a time where so many white artists were co-opting black culture for their own gain, it's kind of fitting that Benny King should outdo all of them so easily. With a song that has been far more ingrained into the popular consciousness than almost any other in history. I mean, this song is iconic. It's easily one of the ones that has aged the best over the years. Seriously, for 1961, the production on this is stunningly clean, while still maintaining that rougher feel that gives it its charm.
If the sky that we look upon should tumble and fall, or the mountain should crumble to the sea,
Now, Benny King did have one more hit in 1961, that being Spanish Harlem, but personally, I've never found it anywhere near as great as this, and it hasn't aged nearly as well. Still good, but just not really a song that I'm ever in the mood to listen to. This I could hear wherever, whenever, and I would instantly feel a little bit better about my day.
No, I won't shed a tear just as long as you stand by me.
I do understand that this song may seem overplayed at this point. I mean, there are over 400 recorded versions out there, covered by everyone from Prince Royce to Florence and the Machine. In 2012, the song was estimated to have grossed $22.8 million US, making it the 6th highest grossing song of all time. Even the 50s chord progression it follows has been nicknamed the Stand By Me progression after it. But it's stuck around and has been so successful for good reason. It's the ultimate anthem to sticking together in the face of hard times, and is easily a cut above the majority of the hippie flower power music that would follow it later on in the 60s. Benny King died in April of 2015 to many tears and tributes. And while it has been nearly 4 years since then, I'd still like to dedicate this video to his memory, as well as the idea that he was pushing with this song. Rest in peace, man. Thanks for leaving us with a ton of great music, with this being, in the opinion of myself and many others, your best work. Stand By Me, easily the best hit song of 1961, and by far one of the biggest and best songs of all time.
Darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Stand by me.
And that's my time, guys. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Bit of a throwback list for sure, but like I said before, this channel is an opportunity for me to learn more about music, no matter how far back I need to go for that. And yes, I promise that the next list will be something a little bit more contemporary. This is just something I want to try. Please leave your feedback in the comments below. Either way, if you'd like to stay on this journey with me, don't forget to hit that notification bell and subscribe so you don't miss a thing. And until the next time, I'm Finn, and this is the Social Tunes signing off.
Whenever you're in trouble, won't you stay?